Today I'm going to cover what kind of loadouts you need for your carriers depending on different situations. There are 3 ways to currently decide your loadout. It is 1, the role the carriers are going to play in the battles, 2, what kind of planes the enemy has, and 3, what kind of ship tier difference do you and the enemy have. Before covering the loadout numbers themselves and how to find out exactly what you need on your own, you need to get a base idea of the different loadouts and the task among them. In case people are new and they didn't know, and that's the reason they came to this video, to get a carrier loadout version of a plane if you're Germany or whatever country doesn't start with them, in the top right corner you'll have these, the icons themselves, you'll have these planes, which you can then research. In the top right corner of these little icons you'll see an aircraft carrier. You click this, then you click research, and this is the way you're going to unlock the carrier version of the aircraft. After it's done researching, it's going to be in your production line over here. Then you're just going to build whatever type of carrier aircraft you want, depending on the little aircraft carrier button here. This little aircraft symbol, that just means it's available for aircraft carriers. The simple way without going into really too much detail is if the enemy has carriers, you're going to want a mostly mix of fighters and naval bombers. If they don't have any carriers and you're going to be engaging them really far out at sea, then you're going to want mostly naval bombers and CAS. You're probably wondering, why not just all naval bombers? Well, you can do that the further down tiers you go in naval bombers and CAS, but as for the first tier of aircraft, which is what most people I assume are going to be using, the torpedo bombers actually have less accuracy than the dive bombers. As you can see right here with naval targeting, the CAS has 10 and the naval bombers have 7.5. These numbers change once you go a little bit further down, where the dive bomber and the torpedo bomber actually are evenly matched under naval targeting with 10, and then it only really goes to an advantage of carrier aircraft for dive bombers and torpedo bombers once you get to 1944 era aircraft. Now let's talk about finding out how many of each plane you actually need depending on your situation. First, what role are your carriers going to play? Something people don't really think about when making carrier groups is that most of the time they need to have a direct role and a dedicated role from the get-go, and you need to decide that very early on, or they're probably going to be useless. Now, when designing your aircraft carrier composition fleet, you need to think of 3 things. 1, are they going to be a support role? 2, are they going to be kind of a balanced fleet? 3, are they going to be a strike group? When designing this, you really need to think about what their main mission is going to be. First, for the support role, you have 2 options. 1, they're going to be trying to get air superiority, which most time means you have really good battleships or really good other ships and the enemy doesn't have that much and you just need to worry about naval bombers. 2, are they going to be kind of a balanced where you know that you and the enemy are pretty evenly matched in terms of aircraft carriers and battleships and all these other types of ships, they're pretty evenly matched. Or C, are they going to be the aircraft carrier strike group? If it's a strike group, that means that your aircraft carriers are the pride of your navy. You don't have that great of battleships, and your main goal is to get the aircraft carriers to do as much as humanly possible, where it's going to be you have an overwhelming force and you're planning on using them for both support and offensive capabilities. A little bit easier to understand if you didn't understand what I was talking about there. Either you're going to have really good battleships in your fleet and have the carrier loadouts mostly of fighters to cover them, or you're going to have really good carriers in your fleet instead, and the air wings are going to be designed around supporting your ships or attacking the enemy ships. Now, figuring out what you want your carrier missions to be, like I was going over earlier, the easiest way to do this is to look at what planes and ships the enemy has. What I'm going to do here is right-click the enemy nation. You have to be at peace for this to work, by the way. You right-click the enemy nation, go to request license production, navy equipment, and then you can look and see their carriers. As you can see, they have carrier 3s, but they do not have more than battleship 2s. They have fighter 2s, which are right here, but that's really about where their superiority ends, and we actually have the exact same tech. So, with that being said, if the enemy has carrier 1s but battleship 4s, you need mostly a naval bomber loadout if you don't have really good battleships but you have good carriers. Now, if you have really good carriers and not very good battleships, and the opposite is occurring on their end where they have mostly battleships but not a lot of carriers, then you need a mostly strike group loadout where I was talking about earlier, where it's mostly naval bombers and CAS. Now, if they're going to be fighting near land, like more than likely in the Pacific, it's not a really bad idea by any means to take away a few of those planes, preferably the CAS, and then add some fighters back, just because you know they're probably going to be doing land strikes, or correction, they're going to be attacking from air bases in different regions. Something really important to remember before I show you guys these aircraft carrier wing compositions, the reason I've done this video and all that stuff a minute ago is to give you guys the tools and the information you need to make your own aircraft carrier wing compositions, because my aircraft carrier wing compositions may not work for every single person out there, and these are only the ones I prefer to use and a couple base rules I use when I'm determining what type of carrier wings I want. Now this is the very last piece of information I'm going to give you guys before we get into the carrier composition wings themselves. The most important piece of information to remember is if you are ever outmatched or undermatched, increase or decrease the plane by 1. So for example, if I tell you guys for a fighter loadout style carrier to go 2 fighters per every 1 torpedo bomber, what you're going to want to do is if they have 1 tier higher fighter than you, increase the ratio of fighters by 1. So if you have fighter 2s, and I tell you to go 2 fighters per torpedo bomber, you would have around 30 fighters and 15 torpedo bombers. If they have a tier fighter higher than you, go from 2 fighters per 1 torpedo bomber to 3 fighters per torpedo bomber. So in reality, you would have about 30 fighters for every, you would have 10 torpedo bombers and around 40 fighters. So just remember that. It's very important to remember go up 1 tier if you're outmatched. And if you're outmatched by their ship size or their ships like battleships and they have lower carriers and you need better torpedo bombers to do more of a job, same thing. Lower the fire count by 1 and then increase the torpedo bomber count by 1. So just keep remembering those ratios. Now for the first carrier wing composition, we have a balanced wing. A balanced wing is set up around the idea of, as you can see, it's kind of balanced, right? They're mostly fighters, but they have torpedo bombers in them. And this is why it's called balanced. First off, the idea behind this is 2 fighters per every 1 torpedo bomber. That's the idea. Now, if you have extra room, it's really up to you, but the main idea is 2 fighters per every 1 torpedo bomber on your fleet. Now, a balanced aircraft carrier wing composition is perfect for my situation here. This was a multiplayer game, and I had to send all of my really good ships over to the eastern side of the world, over into Europe, because of the simple fact that, well, Germany and Italy actually built up their navies, and I had helped the British out. So this was absolutely perfect for this fleet because I had older battleships left in the west that was going to battle the Japanese, but we were still evenly matched. So my carrier wings were designed around a balanced fleet. The torpedo bombers were going to damage their better battleships, so my battleships could sink them, which they did, and my carriers would still have enough planes to get air superiority to take out any of their planes, which, as you can see, it worked great. So one final time, a balanced fleet, 2 to 1. 2 fighters per every 1 torpedo bomber. Now for the next one, it's actually 2 different types of loadouts. They're both support loadouts, but have both very different types of missions they're supposed to do. The first one is going to be to protect your entire fleet that's in combat as a whole. The idea behind this is that you have such advanced battleships that you need as much air superiority as you can, because as long as no naval bombers come in, nothing can touch these guys. A perfect example of this is right here. My fleet, as you can see, I've got a Yorktown that is literally a carrier 3 that is the level 3.5. It is 3.5 but sunk no ships. It got to this point just because of the amount of torpedo bombers that were coming in to try to sink our battleships while they were sinking enemy ships, and all these are ships. And just because of the fact that I had air superiority over them and we were able to use exclusively fighters in this loadout, that I shot so many down with just 1 carrier that it protected the entire fleet. So the first carrier loadout is literally just as many fighters as you can possibly fit into the carrier deck. And remember, it doesn't matter if you have 2 or 3 carriers for this, it is literally just as many fighters as you can get, because you don't want anything happening to your really good battleships. Or subs, whatever. Now the next support composition is going to be used for assisting in naval invasions. The idea behind this is going to be a 4 to 1 ratio. So you're going to want 4 casts per every 1 fighter. Now if you're going to be in an area, again, that you're worried you may not have naval superiority, you can go down 1 on your casts and then go up 1 on the torpedo bomber or 1 on the fighter. It's entirely up to you. So you would be going at a 3 to 1 in 1 ratio. Now for the final fleet, we have a aircraft carrier strike group. Now the idea behind a strike group is you have at least no less than 3 carriers. You have bare minimum 3 to 4 carriers in that strike group. The idea behind it is that you have multiple carriers and you're going to be using them for mostly offensive attacking roles. Now, if you're going to be doing this, you want to have quite a few light cruisers in your fleet because they give a lot of anti-aircraft on this game. They are the best ship at the first and I think second tier to give you the most anti-aircraft in the game. So for an aircraft carrier strike group, like I said, their role is going to be to pretty much attack everything in sight, but you need at least 3 carriers to do it, bare minimum. So the composition for this is going to be a 1 fighter to 3 torpedo bomber ratio. Do not mix it with CAS. It is exclusively 1 fighter for every 3 torpedo bombers. Now, like I said in the beginning, and I don't know if people caught this or not, just in case, I'm going to say it again. If they have 1 tier fighter above you, or 1 tier battleship above you for the fleet that's going to be attacking, increase the plane, the fighter, or increase the torpedo bomber by 1. If their battleships are better, increase the torpedoes by 1, take the fighter down by 1. So this would mean you have pretty much no fighters. As stupid as that sounds, I've had plenty of times where I've absolutely just wiped the fleets out with this loadout before they ever even get any fighters off. As crazy as that sounds, I don't understand why, it just works. By the way, you want to make sure you actually have your naval doctrines, though, before you actually try to do that. Always keep at least 1 fighter if you don't go down your doctrines. But if you do, you can actually sometimes get away with absolutely removing the fighters, and sometimes if you do a strike group like this, you'll have no problem. But the idea is you want to have at least 1 fighter, and then if they have an extra fighter, then just mix it half and half. So if they're at fighter 3 carrier fighters, you're at fighter 2s, then just mix it half and half. So anyway, guys, hopefully this helped you out in your Hearts of Iron 4 carrier adventures, or maybe it even still works in Man the Guns once that comes out. So thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this. I will see you guys next time. If you have any questions, let me know down below, and I will answer them as soon as possible. Thanks for watching. See you guys next time.